Hello, everyone. Welcome back. It's been a wild 3 days. This is basically the end of Ministravaganza, minus our closing ceremonies. I couldn't be more excited to have it close out with this panel featuring Sarah Rowan, our associate game developer, and Will Pagani, our development manager. We're here for one thing and one thing only, and that is to kind of discuss the future of Marvel Crisis Protocol. Before we do that, though, I definitely wanted to start with, he's just dying. Kevin
is one thing.
Kevin is one thing, the future. But first, there's more. That's not how it works, but that's what we're doing. So really, this is just kind of going to be a little bit of a roundtable. We're going to discuss kind of some origin stuff for Marvel Crisis Protocol, like where we've been, where we are, and where we're going. And I promise that there's going to be some pretty exciting stuff in the where we're going. But it was important to us to kind of take a moment and reflect because we're almost at 2 years of Marvel Crisis Protocol, right? 2019.
Well, since it launched.
Since it launched, yeah.
That's
what I meant. That's what I meant. It's been a lot longer for us, of course. We'll talk a little bit about that. But when we started this grand venture, the whole goal was to create this incredible new skirmish game that focused on the Marvel Universe, that let players take control of their favorite Marvel superheroes and supervillains, construct the team of their dreams, and then live out with their opponent a battle of epic Marvel Universe proportions on the tabletop. There were a whole lot of things that we thought about in terms of how the game would be. We made a lot of decisions up front that it would be character-driven, that we'd have flexible army building and all this stuff. And since that time, we've really seen a lot. We've learned so many lessons from watching how the community has embraced the game. We've learned a lot from those 50-some characters that we started development with in the first place, from watching and seeing how the game grows. We've obviously become better at what we do, and in terms of like how we understand stuff. And so I think Pagani, just go ahead and talk a little bit about some of those emergent play patterns, some of the things the lessons that we've learned from development as we've watched kind of the game evolve and grow as we've continued to become better at our craft.
Yeah, so when we were first designing Crisis Protocol and sort of being like, what kind of things do we want in the game, what kind of this kind of stuff, right? We knew that pushes and movement were going to be really important things, and we really wanted to focus on those as key play elements, I guess. Mm-hmm. And then couple that with the very, very important crisis selections, I guess. So mm-hmm. different secures, different extracts, different ways for players to win the game. And we knew that we didn't just want it to be a beat 'em up game. So as the game grew and continued and progressed, right, we learned a lot about what makes a character good, what makes a character less good, what is powerful, what isn't powerful, things like that, right? And that's sort of what Schick is talking about with emergent play patterns. So we see things like, well, positioning is very important. Why is positioning important? Well, there's crisis stuff. There's the ability to attack twice in a turn, which are sort of like the two major, I guess, things that players try to do as the game progresses, right? And we always knew that double attacking was going to be really powerful. And then, of course, pushing people off objectives is really powerful and these kind of things. But we didn't, and I think it's impossible to know, let me say that from the get-go, right? We didn't know exactly how all this was going to shake out because you never can. Whenever you release a game or a design for a game or anything like that into the wild, you have an idea of what's going to happen, mm-hmm. but you're never sure. Right? Anything can go wrong, anything can go right. You can find things that are great, you can find things that are not great. And so these emergent patterns came out where it was different ways to get people to attack twice. Charge. Mm-hmm. We were like, okay, charge is pretty good. You get to move and attack as one action. That's great. I don't think we quite realized how good charge was on characters like Zemo from the core box, mm-hmm. where he has a long move. And then, of course, the range 2 attacks for most of his attacks within range 3 on Steel Rush. How good that charge was, right? Mm-hmm. And then just apply that forward, right? We made, you said 50 characters before. Mm-hmm. 50 characters was kind of the first test wave mm-hmm. of the game, right? Where we just kind of went crazy and made all these things. but I think it was a lot more than that before the game actually came out, and we really got to know what the game really is, right?
Yeah, there was, like we've talked about before, everything with these games you plan for the future. You say, okay, we're going to do our due diligence, make everything as perfect as possible, perfectly balanced in quotes, because as we've discussed before, perfectly balanced is boring. Then everything is the same. It's not true. What you try to do is create a bell curve and keep the edges as close together, because there's always going to be something at the bottom, there's always going to be something at the top. But the closer everything is together, the less that importance matters. And the more you get to add flavor and character, and of course Marvel Crisis Protocol is all about character. And so we started with the core set with Avengers, Wakanda, we had Guardians of the Galaxy in there at the start. We quickly moved on to a lot of other things, and as you said, even before the game began, we were into the wave 2 of the characters. But having time to learn how the system works, to become better and adapted at what you can do and what you can't do, you get to really start to focus. And one of the first things that we did and had implemented from the start, because we knew we would utilize it, I talk about the garden analogy a lot. You plant a garden when you're working on this stuff, and you need to know how to be able to prune hedges, to weed, to pull weeds up and all that. So you give yourself the tools to do it. And the banned and restricted list was kind of one of the first things that came out that we started to use to address different issues and all of that stuff. And of course, we continue to make cool and new characters and add things and build things out with new tactic cards, new characters to affiliations, new affiliations in general. And that kind of leads us a little bit to the current Marvel Crisis Protocol, where now we're looking at, we have the Mystics and Dormammu is one of those ones that breaks a lot of the initial rules in terms of what we thought was possible. The Mystics bring in brand new things, all that stuff. And then, of course, we have the Wave 2 of the X-Men coming in, Ms. Marvel, Hulkbuster, all of that stuff. And all of those things are representative of all of the lessons that we've learned, both in game development specifically, which is what we're talking about, but also as we've talked about over the entire weekend in sculpting and painting, in what's possible in the hard plastic medium. Everything is built on each other. And I think one of the biggest things that we're looking at now as we move into year 2 is we have some opportunities to kind of reflect back, and we've been having a lot of conversations about where we are and where we want to go. So I'm going to kind of turn it over to you and Sarah now to talk a little bit about some very cool things that we're going to be releasing that concern the core rules and a bit of the whys and how those are going to work.
Yeah, Sarah, you want to jump in and run us down on these, or?
Is this the part where I'm supposed to wait for an image to pop up? Or
no, there's no image. There's just core rules
image.
Discussion. No image yet. We're not there.
Core
We're not there.
We have this large blank space. Oh, no, it's backwards. This way. This will remain.
Oh, I did it backwards. Yeah, I did it too.
Yeah, it's mirrored, right?
It's right there.
Yeah, looking at yourself in the camera is always weird. Yeah.
All right, well, now I've got myself all confused. So I'm going to tell Pagani to start, and I will follow Pagani up.
Sure. Yeah, so we've been 2 years. We've seen a lot of what happens. We designed a roster system that is super flexible. You take 10 characters, you take 8 tactic cards, you take 6 crisis cards. You bring that to the table, you modularly create the game that you're going to play at the table. As time has gone on, we have noticed there are some things that could be better in this system. So one of the first things that we're going to do, and this won't release today. Let me just be clear about this. But the plan, and that we'll release in the future, is you get 10 tactic cards instead of 8 tactic cards in rosters. And this has been very helpful for people, right? We get to see more of these really cool, sort of more niche cards. We talked about last Ministravaganza how we were creating less and less unaffiliated cards. We were trying to create more character-specific, more affiliation-specific cards. And this is just building upon that, right? As we progress down that road of doing those things, having more cards available inside of each roster has created these situations where you can start taking more ricochet blasts and lethal protectors and things like that. Because they're cool, and that's really what we want to see, right?
Well, and it also really ties into again, the way in which we've reimagined kind of team tactic cards and what they bring to the game and what they mean. They were always meant to be these big cinematic moments, like Pagani talks about.
Yeah.
And we've kind of reflected, and I think more than likely looking at the stuff that we've spoiled for the new X-Men wave and stuff, you see that the team tactic cards and our approach to them has really turned into okay, you can't fit every cool thing a character could possibly do on the card, on their stat card, but we can provide team tactic cards that add tactical flexibility and options to these characters that allow them to fill roles based on your choice in very different and interesting ways. And that has been really cool. And I like the other thing too, and we've talked about this a lot over the weekend, is that in order for these games to thrive, we always want the communities to grow. We're always very focused on that new player experience and making sure that everything is really great. And once you get in, you have the fun and you're ready. And I think, looking back on it, when we first started this conversation, it was like, well, we said 10. Why wasn't it just 10? 10 and 10. It's so simple. It's so easy to remember instead of 10, 8, and 6. Like, it's right there. So 10 characters, 10 tactic cards.
Not 10 crisis, though.
Not 10 crisis.
No.
We should talk. Sarah should talk about that, though, because I think crisis selection is another one that's really important that we should discuss.
Oh boy!
Yes.
So thank you, Pagani, for helping me get grounded again. Because there's so much we're going to talk about in this panel, and it's very exciting, all of it. And speaking of very, very exciting things, as Shik just bounced me into crisis selection. So, as those of you who have played a long time know, crisis selection is something that can be a little bit. It can be difficult to grapple with for new players. And so what we're doing now, sorry, I keep getting ahead of myself because I'm excited. I'm excited to talk about all
I do it too. Don't worry about it.
We are introducing random crisis selection. So instead of the current method, you're going to bring your 3 cards, not 10, unfortunately. Sorry, everybody.
10 of each.
Just just get that disappointment out of the way. 3, not 10. And then instead of the drafting method, currently they are going to be selected randomly. And this is a huge boon to new players who don't have to fret as much about all of this when they're trying to get into the game. And it is also a huge boon to longtime players who might be aware that there are some interesting meta strategies around gaming a specific crisis with a specific set of characters. So it becomes less likely that your opponent has picked something that they want to turn 1 sweep the board with, and more likely that you're going to have a real game, that you're going to have to go back and forth and play and adapt to new situations.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things when we started way back when, before the Sarah times,
in the long ago.
Yeah, the long ago. The idea around the roster system and crisis selection was always that you got to bring your roster of 10 characters. You got to pick characters that you really enjoyed. You also got to think about how those characters would work together. And the idea behind the crisis, the whole crisis theme, was that you never knew what you were going into. And that's where the random selection came. But we also wanted, at the time, we were a little trepidatious and we were unsure. We hadn't seen the system. And so we gave players a little bit of agency and control. You pick 3 crises, but you draw 2 and you get to pick 1. Well, really, as we've learned over the last couple of years and watching play patterns and emergent patterns come about, that's not as random as we initially wanted. And so we're kind of moving the needle back into putting the focus more on the roster selection and your ability to adapt to the random crises that are presented to you. And I think Pagani can talk a lot more in specifics about kind of how this change really affects some of those emergent play strategies that Sarah was talking about.
Yeah, I mean, I think Sarah really hit the nail on the head, right? We're talking about those turn 1 strategies where you're going to be like, I have these 2 out of my 3 crises that I know I can do this type of combination play on the top of turn 1, and then my opponent is playing from very far behind. Some of you may remember Hired Muscle. That one kind of kicked off this entire community plan. I don't know how to really name that, but like that whole idea of, I can do these really powerful plays on turn 1. And while we like people making plans, obviously, right, like you're building a roster, you're building all these things, your goal is to create the best outcome that you can. based out of these things, some of it went a little too far. Hired muscle was egregious, and it was banned accordingly. But that really opened our eyes, and I believe the community's eyes, into this style of play that we don't really like very much as game developers, because it's not as fun, right? Like, you're not out there, you're not playing a game, you're not enjoying it, you're not really interacting with your opponent very much. It's much more about what kind of combination play can I have here. So by creating a fully random crisis selection, and when I say fully random, right, you still get to pick 3 secure and 3 extract, and your opponent will go through it, and one of you will pick one or the other, and they'll just get one of your 3 randomly, right? Now, if you're playing this style of play, it's going to be much more variable. Can I execute this combination? And then can I find 3 of these combinations that I can execute on all 3 of my crisis? And then do I get to pick that half of the crisis? So, like, it's now a whole lot more variables that you have to account for, which is fine, right? Like, you can still do these style things. It's just going to be a lot harder, and it's going to make players commit a lot more in terms of opportunity cost. And when you talk a lot about opportunity cost in Crisis Protocol, when we talk about, like, the ban restricted list, and this kind of all plays into that kind of thing. So it's a change that I'm very excited about, because I think it's going to get people into more just playing the game and less of this, like, meta strategy of how can I game the system, which I feel like has been a big theme all weekend for us, Schick, is how can we stop people from gaming setup systems, scenario systems, first player systems, and just play the game and have a good time.
Yeah, and I think, like, again, one of the most important things, and one of the clarifying points when we started working with this system, these new changes with the playtesters, of course, the 10 team tactic cards obviously opened up so many options in roster building. It was a no-brainer. It was great. The crisis selection, though, at one point, one of the playtest groups came back and they were like, all of a sudden with this change, my roster matters more. My crises matter less. My roster matters more. The characters I'm taking, the things I'm doing, because I have to be more flexible and I can't just plan around these specific plays. And to me, that was like, well, that's the point. It's not called Crisis Protocol because it's about picking a crisis card. It's Crisis Protocol because the characters are coming in. The characters are the most important point. Yeah. Put the focus on the characters. Because that's why we're here. We're here to play with these awesome heroes and villains in the Marvel Universe. And that was a huge thing. This ties into another change that we are making to roster selection, which concerns Infinity Gems. And this was one that I will totally raise my hand and say, what I thought was a good idea at the time, I actually, upon reflection, realized that it works kind of against the whole core of what we wanted from Marvel Crisis Protocol, which again is to be able to play with these awesome characters and make rosters of 10 characters and stuff. And that was the fact that the Infinity Gems took a slot in the roster. The more we looked at it and talked about it, the more we saw the play patterns emerge and everything. I quickly realized that there was a better way to do it. And there was one that also could curtail some of the weirdness around how they filled the roster slots and things like that. So with Infinity Gems, Sarah, you want to tell everybody how those work now after you worked through the playtesters with them?
Yes. So as Schick already alluded to, them taking up a space in your roster, and surprise, surprise, the change has to do with that. They are no longer going to do that. The Infinity Gems are now going to be, rather than taking up a space in your roster and then being assigned at the point of squad creation, are going to be assigned to a specific character in the roster at the point of roster creation. So this both gives and takes flexibility at different points from the ways that they can be used. So you're locked into using it on a specific character, but you have more freedom in your roster. You haven't spent a slot on the gem itself. I think that covers it.
Yeah. I like this change because it makes players commit, right? We talked a lot about strategies that rely on the super flexibility and things like that, and this change, you no longer have that, like, I get my cake and I get to eat it too. even though I do love eating cake. Love a good cake. But yeah, this makes players commit to these gems, to these characters, right? You can no longer take like Thanos, Corvus, Proxima, and then a bunch of gems and just be like, I'm going to play Tetris and figure out my list at the table with a couple 2-pointers, right? So this commitment will, one, let players know what you're bringing. So like they can help tailor their squad. They know, hey, I have Thanos with a mind gem, or I have Corvus and Proxima with a reality gem. And then they know that Thanos can never get that reality gem. So like they can start playing around those type things. So it gives more information to your opponent, which is great. And then it makes you sort of specialize these characters a little bit more. And I think these are all wins. And it lets you take more characters in your roster, which is great, because who doesn't love more characters? More tactic cards, more characters. That's my motto right
That's
now.
it. And then the last change to a... Oh, sorry, were you going to say something, Sarah?
Oh, I was just going to say that I think it's another cinematic change secretly, because I've never seen anyone tossing the Infinity Gems back and forth to each other real quick as they head into battle. Like, oh snap, I think you could use this a little better. No, you commit, like you were saying. So
and Chad is asking for the characters that can take multiples. You can't put both on them, obviously, because you can only take one Infinity Gem unless you're Thanos. So yes, you would have to commit to one of the gems inside of your roster. For example, Strange would have to have the Time Gem or the Soul Gem. You could put like both on them in your roster and then pick.
And then the last change that we want to talk about when it comes to the core rules update that will be dropping sometime in the near future, I will commit to before the end of the year. There you go. Pagani's like, wait, what?
Like, hold on, what did he just say?
Before the end of the year.
For these updates?
For these core rules updates, yes.
these are all about committing, Pagani.
Sure.
Yeah, that's what we're doing.
I think we missed an update that goes into that.
We did. No, we have one more. We have one more.
Okay.
I'm just saying.
Okay, all right.
I'm giving a timeline here. I'm giving a timeline.
Sure.
So the last one concerns alter egos and how they affect roster construction. So I'll let one of you pick that up and talk about what that means.
Very well. I feel like... Oh, okay.
No, you got it.
Are you trying to throw me off? Is that what we're doing? It's late. It's the final panel, and you're just trying to mess with
It's super late for poor Sarah, so now you're just being mean. She's on the East Coast for crying out loud.
So, alter egos, as Schick mentioned. So this change is hopefully not earth-shattering, but instead just a little bit exciting. And that is that you will now be allowed to include multiple characters with the same alter ego on your roster, but still not on your squad.
Mm-hmm.
So two Peter Parkers can be in your roster together, no matter what alter superhero name they're using, but they still can't both go on the field together. So, not earth-shattering, but does give you a little more flexibility in your roster building.
Mm-hmm. And that is also very important for Strange, who's about to come out with the second Strange.
The biggest
Black Widow
thing,
a little less so because she's not a leader, but still applicable if you want.
So the biggest thing that we were looking at as we kind of approached this change was because we're kind of stepping into a spot where we are doing more alternate versions of characters, and we know that's something that we really want to explore in the future. As we've always talked about, there are so many different moments for so many of the great characters in Marvel, and we want to be able to explore them. And we were able to create characters that felt remarkably different while still being true to their versions. Doctor Strange is a great example of a character in his original form that feels very different from the form that is coming out. They both present different tactics and strategies that you might want to utilize. They both fit into affiliations slightly differently. And it just felt like we didn't want to see an entire squad of Doctor Stranges taking the crisis field. Being able to select the Doctor Strange that you felt was best for the now more randomized crisis that was coming your way was just a real boon to players, and it allows you, if you want, and you super love Peter Parker, or you very much are a fan of Doctor Strange, now you have the opportunity to take more of that character and have that character be more impactful in your squad plan and approach going forward. Go ahead.
Sorry, I just noticed that chat is asking about something that, speaking of our playtesters, they immediately asked about, which is now, what if I just take 10 Thanos which literally the playtesters immediately did, so good on you. And I did neglect to mention that while you can take multiple people with the same alter ego, you can't take them with the same alter ego and superhero name. So you cannot take 10 identical Thani.
Yeah, I was about to say, this brings us to the discussion of what is the plural of Thanos.
It's an inevitable. I mean, we don't know what the plural is, but we know it's an inevitability of Thanos's. So when you get a group together, it is an inevitability, like a murder of crows.
Wonderful.
Exactly.
Wonderful.
So yeah. Oh, go ahead, Sarah.
No. Sorry, I'm just trailing off. You go.
So that brings us to the conclusion of the core rules update that we're going to be implementing. Again, this was based on a whole bunch of observation, of us learning more about the system. And it's important to us that, well, we don't make changes rashly and we take a lot of care and consideration about these. We've been working on these actually for about a year now in terms of just internally talking about them, testing them, talking. So change comes very slowly, much like with the banned and restricted list. We like to watch things play out in the wild, and we like to really analyze these kinds of changes. We don't do any of this lightly. However, we are really excited by what this is going to bring, and I think it's going to breathe an exciting refresh into a game that is already going really strong, and we've been very happy with the reception and just watching the community adapt and build around it. So we're super thrilled to be bringing this. Again, that update is going to happen before the end of the year. I'm really got my fingers crossed that we're going to be hitting in October, November, right around the anniversary, with all of the stuff that we're talking about here. And so that is part one of the future. Should we talk about part two?
Part uno.
Part two.
This is the part where we get pictures, right?
Pretty soon. There are pictures pretty soon.
Yes.
I do have to explain a little bit about part two and let me set the scene. Let me set the stage
All right.
Yeah. So when Marvel Crisis Protocol launched, it launched in English only. Part of this was just due to everything around the game and all of that. But as we've seen the global community grow, which has been absolutely incredible, and we see people playing Marvel Crisis Protocol in all places in the world, we have an opportunity in the coming year to begin localization and bring this amazing game and bring the communities across the globe more of the game in their own languages. This is going to be a big project for us. We're very excited for what it means for the growth, and just, again, if you can grow these great communities, we just get to have more friends across the world that we can share a same language with. And so there's been a whole lot of work that's been done so far to make this a reality. Again, this is going to be a long-term project, but it does mean that the tried and true stat card that you all have seen and loved over the last 2 years is going to be changing. It's going to be changing a lot due to the necessary requirements of localization. So we are going to have and be showing you this new stat card here in a second. However, when this happened, we saw a rare and unique opportunity. Because all of the stat cards are going to get localized and changed into this new format eventually over time, as we move into this brand new world of having e-figs, English, French, Italian, German, and Spanish going forward. We knew that we had a window in which we could start discussing what about all of the characters that we were working on in the past. You'll notice that a theme of talking about the future started with where we came from. And we have, of course, learned so much about what makes a character great, what are the things that a character needs in order to thrive. And the field has changed as we've gotten better and more innovative with things. We've just learned how to better implement stuff. And of course, when you look at how to get into Marvel Crisis Protocol, one of the biggest things is the core set. Those 10 iconic characters that come in it, that split down between the Avengers and the Cabal, all of that stuff, that is the entry spot for new players. And it's going to be the entry spot for a lot longer. And we don't want to dilute that, and we obviously want to make sure that it is a strong and desirable spot to start with. And we also, of course, want to make sure that those iconic characters continue to stand in an important place within the meta of the game as it continues to evolve, and we wanted to apply some of the lessons that we learned. So while typically this is not something that we particularly consider as part of the approach, we had the rare opportunity to do it in a way that we felt was going to work within the community, within the way in which we wanted the game to go, and we decided to seize upon it. And so while I don't have, we don't have any brand new characters to show you, we do have a couple of sneak peeks to show you of characters that you know and love in some very different light. So why don't we go ahead and start with whatever's first. I don't even remember anymore because we changed it so much. It's MODOK. Perfect. So with all of the characters that were primarily designed before the game released, and I should probably very specify that the character adjustments that we're talking about and that you're going to see as we go through this, and we're only going to show a few of them. There are many more, of course, in the core set in that initial batch of approximately 50 to 60 characters that we wanted to kind of go back and look at with fresh eyes. We looked at what were the outliers, what were the ones that maybe didn't quite hit the mark or have aged not as gracefully, what were the ones that maybe swung a little too far to one side. So I'll let Pagani talk a little bit, and Sarah can chime in as well, about our first one here, which is MODOK.
Sure. So, as Shik said, some characters are over, some characters are under, and the goal is always to have that bell curve and bring characters as close to the middle as we can without homogenizing. But as the game has gone on, we have learned a lot about what makes characters powerful, what needs to be kept in check, and this kind of thing. So there are a few changes on this MODOK card. Well, first of all, I just want to say I love this new card design. I think it's very readable. The colors pop super duper well. Phenomenal.
Important to note that they're the same size as the current MCP stat cards. They're just simply horizontal instead of vertical.
Yep. So there are a couple changes here. Bow to the will of MODOK. If you've been paying attention, you've seen a bunch of characters get very similar rules that have the restriction of this superpower can only be used once per turn, or be used only once per turn, as we write it there. We also have Imbecile. All the world is a weapon to MODOK, which if you can get a Shik to yell that, it is fantastic.
Imbecile! That's how I sound a lot in the office, to be honest.
Phenomenal. Also once per turn. That one didn't change. P-Brain, however, is the one that changed.
You wanted P-Brain. That's the one you wanted.
Yes.
Look, you got Shik to
It's
shout.
true. I got bamboozled here. I had to yell imbecile like a fool.
Yes.
When that's not what we wanted.
So through those changes, I think that helps bring MODOK in line with the rest of the game. He can no longer dump basically infinite amounts of power into damage or defense. And then obviously he is no longer the massive control piece that he was. He's still very strong and very, very good, right? So I think this version of MODOK will be slightly more in line with the rest of the game. And these are the kind of things that we're looking at doing, is not taking characters that are on the top and putting them on the bottom, right? Just pulling them down just a little in a very measured way to make sure that the characters that you all play with and love remain valid and important in the game. As we've talked about so many times, so many times with the banner restricted list updates, our goal is never to take anything away from you that you have hobbied and painted and put your time and effort into. And that is still the goal with these changes. So there's an update on MODOK there. I think we've got...
Somebody in the chat just called the next one. Should we put up Shuri next?
I think we should.
So one of the big things with the Wakandans, which were designed right at the beginning of the whole process for us, which puts them almost 3.5 years ago now, if not a little bit more, is that pushes at the time were really important. I remember playing the very first game of the very first design of rules that I had done way back when with Pagani, who had just had his first child, and we played through it, and in that brand new parent mode, he stared blankly like a zombie at the table, and I was like, he hates it, and I'm gonna have to convince him that we're on the right path. We're gonna have a fight. And just very quietly he said, I like it. It needs a lot more pushes. And then he got up and he wandered away, and then he came back into the room because he realized we weren't done, but in his sleep-deprived brain, that's all he needed to do. And we had a conversation about that. And so when we started looking at characters, we started to realize that pushing and mobility, and we wanted movement and all this stuff, was really important along with the throws. And I think it became a very big cornerstone of the foundation that was to become Marvel Crisis Protocol. But what we didn't really understand or realize at the time was that the size restrictions were so important and would have such a dramatic impact on certain characters and their viability within the game. And so Wakanda kind of got away with a lot of stuff in terms of its ability to just bully the board in kind of unintended ways. And so this is another one where Sarah can kind of talk about the very small but very consequential change to Panther Gauntlets and how that's kind of affected things.
Sure. Well, anybody who remembers Shuri before will probably already know what's coming, but there's a little tweak that Shuri can no longer bully everybody with the Panther Gauntlets. Only people size 3 or less, which is still most people. So again, to Pagani's point, the goal is not to totally throw away something that people loved about this character, which was her ability to shove around people bigger than her, but just bring it a little bit in line with other characters of similar threat values, so that she's not necessarily all the time, as people like to say, the best in class. Just pull her back closer to everybody else a little bit.
Yeah, so a very small change, but a very impactful one, and another example of kind of how we've been reevaluating some of these characters. Most things are relatively minor in terms of their scope. Sometimes it's just a number, sometimes it's a little bit more. For those asking about kind of the design in the cards and how they are this way, again, all of this has been designed specifically with localization in mind. So the way that the design is laid out and all of that makes it possible for us to be able to offer these cards in all of the localized languages and do so very easily and in a way that is affordable for all those locations as well. So while it may be different, and I know that different can be weird, everything here has been done for the usability of all across the globe, and that's really important to us, and obviously the biggest first step of the change here. I'll also go ahead.
Let me piggyback on that one. There are also accessibility changes to these cards that make it a lot easier for a lot of people with certain issues to read and process the language here. So that is why some of the things are this way as well. So.
And for those asking, the way in which this rollout will happen is that along with the core rules, there will be a document for the errata changes in the FAQ. These cards will be available to print for folks who want to use the new rules. And then sometime next year, and again, I'd love to give you a more specific date. We're aiming for Q2 or Q3, but again, as we've talked about all weekend, the global pandemic and the shipping crisis has kind of thrown a lot of things out of whack for us. There's going to be a new card pack that's going to include all of the updated character cards, as well as a bunch of other cards as well that will be aimed at both existing and new players. And we're going to be talking more about what to expect from that card pack probably at the next Ministravaganza. But we are going to be making these cards available both as free downloads for those who want, and then also as physical cards so that you can replace them in your collection as well. And reprints going forward will, of course, have these changes as well in them with the new card designs. So if you haven't picked up these characters yet, you'll be able to do so, and you'll be able to get the new cards in one of many ways. So we've looked at 2 characters that have kind of gotten a slight downturn. I think now it's time to start looking at characters. Yes, Pagani.
I would also like to point out the wording change for upgrades and P-Brain, both on MODOK, have different timing steps than they do in their current versions. And this is because we heard the community's reply to the rules forum, I guess, answer of you do what the card says, and everybody was like, well, we don't like that. So we put this we changed the wording to match how all of our community has been playing with these rules, because I agree with you all. I think it is the more intuitive way and easier way to do these rules. So that will be rolling out with all of these things as well. All of those characters will be receiving similar wording to this.
Okay, so now let's move on to an iconic character from the core set, one Captain America. So again, this is a character that at the time when we were working on, it had a lot of relevance. The leadership was super powerful, super iconic character, but has not quite aged as gracefully based on emergent play patterns and just the things that we have learned, specifically when it comes to, again, the size value of pushes. compared to some of the other 4-threat characters that we have in the game. And so we wanted to reevaluate Captain America for the modern age. He is no longer a man out of time. So
He's back in time.
He's back in time. So Sarah, do you want to walk us through some of the changes that we've made here on Steve Rogers?
Oh boy. So the thing about working on something for this long is not always being able to stare at something and entirely remember all of the things without the changelog. So Pagani,
I can back you up here.
Thank you so much. We back each other up. This is what's great.
Absolutely. It's teamwork. It's all about
teamwork.
the teamwork. It makes the dream work, and this is the dream. So the strike now pushes size 3 things. Shield slam now throws size 3 things?
Yep.
Yes, it's a throw. Sorry. I was thinking throw or push. It's throw. Also, you will see that shield throw, Cap apparently learned something from Falcon, perhaps, and it now generates a power as well.
And it went to strength 5 instead of 4.
Oh, I missed the strength 5.
Yeah.
That is true.
See?
That is true. I'm frozen.
You are frozen, and it's pretty funny right now. So
I went back in time. Cap froze me.
You're looking fondly at Cap's right boot.
And
Kevin, call you back in.
oh,
Yeah.
so we might lose the
Oh.
Pagani for a second. So I'll talk a little bit about the impact of these changes. Obviously, are pretty significant. The ability to push size 3 characters obviously opens up Cap as more of a control piece. Being able to throw those characters as well makes the cost 2 strength 6 attack quite respectable because you're able to get that extra throw damage. You can get a character off of an objective much easier for that 2 power. Tony, what are you doing? What are you doing? You just spoiled everything. I wasn't even done. Well, we're just done here. We're just done here. Why do I bother? Why do I even try with you, Tony? You're just killing me. You're killing me. So shield throw, of course, generating power makes him able to bodyguard and stay kind of in the backfield or the midline much easier. And strength 5 is super respectable. We've seen huge things throughout it. But you don't care about this anymore. You might just roll to the next one, Tony. Just roll to the next one. Kick Pagani out. And,
Am I back?
Just go on. Yeah, I can hear your voice. I don't know if your camera's there.
Oh.
So the big reveal, the excitement, because we can't have nice things this weekend. We just can't. We can't have anything fun. Is of course Hulk. So Hulk is a character who was really unique. He was one of the toughest. Somebody asked me in the last stream, like, was there anyone who you think would be really tough to balance? And the honest answer is we already did that, and it was Hulk. When we did Hulk in the original batch of characters, he was so overwhelming and just difficult for people to deal with in playtest that I think he got toned down to a respectable level when it came to the first batch, but he was quickly outpaced as new characters were released. And this was a combination of things like not having size restrictions, which meant his size 4 was less relevant and he could be bullied around by people like Shuri. But also just in terms of our conservative and worriedness about how Hulk smashy could a Hulk be.
Turns out pretty smashy.
So there's a whole lot of changes to this card, and I'll let one of the developers walk through all of them.
Oh, all of them is
All of them.
Here we go. Free recall. Sarah, you want to try the free recall? This is like a quiz show now.
It is.
It really is. This is exciting. So we're going to start with the most obvious one, that there's an entire new superpower sitting right smack dab in the middle of this card, Hulk Not Puny Banner. Those of you who have played the Ultimate Encounter with the Hulk might be familiar with some of what this does, although it has been, again, Ultimate Encounter characters, speaking of Shik's balancing, are not exactly intended for normal play. So don't get too excited, but it is pretty good. So that's the all of it is new for Hulk.
The whole power right in there.
Whole thing.
So one of the biggest things with Hulk was just increasing his durability. So you'll see that his defensive stats went up. He is now a 4-3-3. So Mystic stayed the same, but he's a 4-3-3. So he's much better against physical. This was lessons learned with She-Hulk. And one of the reasons why She-Hulk was developed the way she was is that we had realized that we had made a couple of mistakes when it came to Hulk's defensiveness and his durability. Hulk Not Puny Banner was just another tick towards the player being able to control how much damage Hulk is taking. Hulk still very much wants to take that damage, thanks to You Won't Like Me When I'm Angry, which you'll notice has gone to 4 instead of 3.
So a little less on the dice number overall.
A little bit, but he is far more durable when you want him to be. One of the biggest things I think in terms of just when Pagani and I were talking about Hulk in that initial batch, we did discuss, Pagani came up with this great idea, which was, what if he just generates power at the start and he doesn't have to worry about building it? However, what we didn't really get to until later on in our development understanding of the game was that while that initial burst of power is great, it wasn't quite enough to put Hulk to where he needed to be. So you'll now notice that the strike actually generates power. We also raised the strength of the strike to 7. So this makes Hulk far more power efficient. He can do a lot of the things he wants to do. He can Thunderclap, Hulk Smash. He can have power for Hulk Not Puny Banner, Gamma Leap. Strongest one there is. It just makes Hulk more Hulk. And of course, I think the last big change here is the fact that he can now throw size 5. He has no restriction on his throw when it comes to Hulk Smash.
Hulk Smash. I was like, hold on.
No. Not the strongest one there is. Hulk Smash. Hulk Smash, as long as he rolls that while, he can throw. And then the last one was we gave him immunity to stun, because one of the things that we saw that Hulk really struggled with was once you put a stun on him and just neutered his power generation, he became a lot less Hulk and a lot more Banner. And as you'll notice from the card, this is Hulk Not Puny Banner. So here you go. Now, these are just 4 examples of some of the changes that you're going to see. There are plenty more in testing. And again, these will all be coming out before the end of the year. So instead of giving you something brand new and not seen before, we hope that this look at the future of Marvel Crisis Protocol and our return to what was and what will be energizes and excites you for the future of the game. Personally, it's been an absolute joy to be able to go back and again make sure that we're building the greatest foundation for this game going forward as possible. And it all starts with that core set and those initial iconic characters. And I couldn't be more thrilled for where we're going. And of course, there's tons more new characters that are coming your way, but we'll save those for Ministravaganza 2.
3?
My fellow developers, Ministravaganza 3. Not for Ministravaganza 3. Look, Tony spoiled our Hulk surprise, so I'm just discombobulated right now.
Spoiled, it was just...
Tony, 2, 3, I don't need to know numbers. That's what you two are here for. So please, number people, take us out. Give us some last thoughts. Give us some feelings.
Well, I could give you some last numbers. It's that I just list them off.
Just random numbers?
Yeah, it's numbers. 3. That's good.
3 sounds wonderful.
I hear it's a magic number.
So thank you everyone for looking at 2 all through the weekend, all through Thursday, Friday, and today. And we're looking forward to 3 with you sometime in the future.
Someday.
Does Pagani want to spoil why he almost cheated during the game today before he signs off with his Captain Marvel?
I mean, I cheated several ways. But the way that I almost cheated is binary form is becoming cost 4.
All right, and with that, I think we're good to say it's not 3, but it is 4. So thank you, everyone, for joining us for this very unexpected, I would hope, panel where we look at the future of MCP. We're very excited to continue on this great journey. We appreciate all of you and all of your dedication and passion and joy of the game. So please continue to show us everything that's going on, what's on your painting table, what's on your game table, as the world begins to open up, and hopefully in your area you're able to play more. We have lots more surprises in store, and we can't wait to share those with you on Ministravaganza the next. Till next time, we'll be back with closing ceremonies. Thank you and goodbye.